I made a list for the champions I feel are most gimped and the champions I feel are most broken in the game in terms of how flawed their kits are. I figure I should give my opinion on champions I feel are simply doomed in terms of ever having any meaningful balance changes because their fandom would never allow them to change. Remember, this is not really talking about balance of champions in the current meta or stating whether or not they are overpowered or underpowered. This list, and in fact the previous lists too, only look at balance as a way to demonstrate how difficult a champion might be to keep fair and balanced. Some of these champions are very playable in solo queue right now, and some of them have seen or may be currently seeing some competitive play. To reiterate, a doomed champion is simply one that could use some changes, but the fanbase and Riot would never allow it. This is an interesting topic to talk about because of an incident that happened a long time ago. Ashe was the go-to champion of League and her popularity was immense back in beta. She was seen as overpowered, and if your team didn't have one and the enemy team did, it was pretty much a not lose. I don't quite remember her pick rate, but it was something around 70 to 80% pick rate during this time. I could be wrong about the number, but what I do know is that people kept demanding she be tuned down. Riot went patches without nerfing her, and one writer finally mentioned that they had been hesitating to nerf her because she's such a popular champion. This resonates with today considering Riot has been very hesitant to nerf certain problematic champions simply because they're very popular. The first one up is Lee Sin. Lee Sin is a solo queue powerhouse and someone who can mercilessly shut down the early game of champions so hard that he ends games before they leave the laning phase. His mobility, his energy sustain, and his burst is off the charts for a jungler, and the level of playmaking his kit allows is ridiculous. So why is he such a doomed champion? Whenever Lee Sin has been a problem, Riot has hesitated to even bother touching him. He's such a popular champion that nerfing him would piss off a ton of people. Hell, Riot even stated that they know he's often a broken champion, but simply can't touch him because of how much it would upset players. If you Google Ghostcrawler and Lee Sin, all you get is a bunch of links to angry posts cursing at Ghostcrawler and Riot for their nerfs and about how the champion is dead and so on. When Riot displayed their intended power shifts for Lee Sin, Reddit bitched and moaned so hard that Riot had to can the changes entirely. Next up is Heimerdinger. Aside from reaching mimetic status as a donger, his kit is just really hard to balance. He used to be one of the most overpowered champions in the game, then he got nerfed into oblivion, then buffed up, and became toxic again, and then nerfed again until he received a rework. His rework has admittedly more avenues in which he could be balanced through, but his core gameplay is likely to never change, and that's the problem. Riot created a champion that encourages pushing, but more through attrition and siege. This causes his lane to become a lane that lacks interaction and is more about playing chicken half the time. If you can stop his crawl, then that's all you get to really focus on. If you can't, then you just get your shit kicked in. For sure, he's squishy and can be ganked hard by some junglers, but at the same time, he has tools to punish any form of aggression. The thing is that he's currently not a problem in the game. Several popular champions can push back his crawl and several popular junglers can gank him, but that's because Riot probably remembered the times where Heimerdinger had comparable damage to mages and how just that alone allowed him to bully everyone off the lane and pissed everyone off. Buffing him could result in having lanes where nothing happens and the game just teeters into Dolesville. Heimerdinger is like a champion that was designed for a different game. His gameplay simply doesn't fit League of Legends or is simply not supported, and thus he's doomed to mediocrity. Speaking of attrition lanes, Cinched is by far one of the worst cases of champion balance still in the game. I could have put him in the most gimped or even in the most broken kit list, but I figured this list would encompass it all. Cinch's kit is so painfully simple, it has so very little avenues in which you could bother tweaking it. His Q is a toggle spell that leaves a damage over time debuff, and that's all what it does. His W is an AoE range slow, and his E is a small nuke flip, while his ultimate is basically just stats. There is so very little going on there, and that's a result of him being League's literal first champion created. His laning consists of him having little interaction with his opponents outside of pushing the lane relentlessly and occasionally flipping his foe. The braver Cinch players can farm past tower protected areas, and the even braver can farm inside the enemy base with little fear. That's kind of his entire gameplay right there. He just runs around and occasionally flips someone. In teamfights, he just runs around in circles still and poisons people and flips the MVP if he can catch them. There really isn't any playmaking capacity, no versatility or flavor to this champion. He's just a running man. The reason why he qualifies for Doom status is because you simply cannot tweak a champion with such a simple kit kit in any meaningful way. If the matchups he's strong against are currently trending, then he may see play, and if he sees play, then he'll piss players off again and do his proxy shenanigans all over again until Riot nerfs him yet again. If his negative matchups prevail, then he'll just get stomped. He's doomed because he's in desperate need of a rework, yet, at least in my opinion, there isn't much Riot could do to tweak his current kit to make it function. I think he needs a Scion level rework at this point, but he might lose his entire identity as a result. Now this one might cause some confusion upon me mentioning it, but hear me out. Corki is by far, at least in my opinion, one of the game's most doomed champions. He's an awesome champion and pops up in competitive here and there. He has well-defined weaknesses and matchups that can be used to stop him. What dooms him is his ability to spiral out of control with indirect changes and meta shifts. When he's good, he reaches permaban status and is never played. When he's really damn good, he causes other things to be nerfed. He goes through this sort of infinite cycle of harsh ups and downs. I know ranged carry champions tend to go through this phase of going in and out of playtime depending on the meta, but it seems Corki's is the most extreme. It's almost becoming a running joke with Corki and the World's Tournament too. Riot has a history of buffing Corki or an item of his when a major tournament like the World Tournament looms ahead, and he becomes a highly contested pick all of a sudden. Corki is just pure damage with bare bones utility. He can poke, he can grind opponents down, and he deals true magic and physical damage. He's a lawnmower and the enemy champions are grass. The only problem is that a champion like him goes through extremes in both ways when faced with balance changes, and as such he is doomed to replay these scenarios every season. I hope the most astute of you saw this coming. Teemo is by far the most doomed champion of League of Legends, a fan favorite who has reached hardcore meme status even amongst Riot. It's a likelihood that Riot will avoid tampering with him anytime soon. The thing is that he has one of the most toxic kits in the game, literally and figuratively, and makes the game unfun for his opponents. He has a plethora of weaknesses that Riot doesn't tackle because, as I figure, he'd be a pain in the ass if they actually made him decent. For those who have been playing for a long time, there was one instance in which Teemo was a must-ban pick and sweet lord were nightmares brewed during that time. Games were painfully slow and there was nothing you could do to stop Teemo from pushing you into oblivion. By picking Teemo, you made sure at least one player didn't get to play League of Legends for 30 minutes. His kit has a nasty combination of being really simple but also being very frustrating to play against. It has the potential to just shut down champions with little to no counterplay available. Fun fact, Teemo has not received any buffs since Season 1 and has even been nerfed a few times last season, likely due to items. Riot leaves Teemo alone because he somehow reached a status where players just accept his mediocrity but love him as a mascot, so Riot likely doesn't feel the need to tinker with him and ruin the good thing they have going. However, if any abusive items come out or the upcoming buffs to AP items cause Teemo to spiral out of control, I wouldn't be surprised if they neuter the hell out of him. Remember, this video was not about champion balance in the sense of overpowered or underpowered, but about problematic balance issues with kits that are difficult to address, either because of fandom or Riot's intentions for a champion. If you feel I should have mentioned someone else or would like to dispute something I talked about in this video, write it in a comment below.